My name is Adam Knox. I'm 33 years old, and for the last decade, I've been the family ATM with a pulse. It didn't start that way. I grew up thinking we were close, tight-knit in that chaotic but loving sitcom kind of way. We celebrated birthdays with dollar store balloons and store-brand cake, teased each other over Sunday dinners, made dumb home videos. I thought we had each other's backs. I really did. But then I started doing well. I skipped college, jumped straight into work after high school, and fumbled my way into starting a logistics company. For 5 years I scraped by, lived on ramen, slept in the office, then one year, something clicked, contracts rolled in, clients stuck around, and suddenly I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And that's when the calls started. At first, it was innocent. Hey, Adam, can you help cover mom's dental bill? Of course, dad's truck broke down, can you spot us? Sure. Then it turned into credit cards, tuition, rent. Jason, my younger brother, was always between jobs or starting something big. He dropped out of college twice, flopped through 3 jobs, but somehow always managed to land softly. He was the golden boy. Everyone said he had charisma, potential, charm. He could do no wrong even when he did everything wrong. I told myself it was okay. Helping family was what you did when you made it, right? Except it wasn't help anymore. It was expectation. Every thank you got shorter. Every request got louder. And somewhere along the way, thank you turned into finally. It all came to a head at Jason's wedding. From the start, I was roped in first to help with the venue, then the flowers, then the photographer, cake, catering. Every time I hesitated, it's Jason's big day. Can't you just... I said yes. Again and again. By the time the dust settled, I'd poured just under $100,000 into the wedding, and not one person asked if I was okay with that. The wedding was Pinterest perfect. Vineyard at sunset, string quartet playing Elvis, guests glowing under fairy lights like a Hallmark movie climax. Except I wasn't in the bridal party. I wasn't listed in the program. I wasn't even asked to speak. I chalked it up to oversight, or Jason being overwhelmed, or Ava, his bride, not knowing better. I told myself that while I sat alone 2 tables away from the DJ booth, sipping flat champagne, watching my brother glide around like a prom king. Then came the speeches. The best man was charming, nostalgic. People clapped. Then my dad took the mic, glassy-eyed and swaying just slightly. He smiled that crooked grin he gets when he thinks he's being clever. And he looked right at me. We always knew Jason would find someone special. He slurred lightly. He's got charm, good looks, and now, finally, he's settling down. He paused. As for Adam, well, he chuckled. He's not married, not educated, but hey, at least he's good for a check. Laughter. Not awkward chuckles, loud, full-bellied laughter. Even Jason doubled over. My mom put her hand over her mouth like it was just one of Dad's jokes. Ava smiled politely. Nobody stopped him. I froze. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I didn't move. Because something in me, something old, brittle, and exhausted just snapped. I stood, walked to the mic. Dad reached to hand it to me with a smirk like it was all a gag, but I didn't look at him. I looked at the crowd. You know what I said? Voice flat, steady. He's right. I'm not married. I didn't get a degree. I don't have a wife or kids, but I do have something none of you seem to care about: a spine and a memory. The room went silent. I turned to Jason and Ava. You know that $100,000, $1,000 wedding gift, the venue, the band, the gown? I smiled. Forget it. Someone dropped a fork. And before anyone tells me it was a joke, I said, jokes usually come with a punchline. That was just laughing at the guy who made all this possible. Ava opened her mouth, probably to smooth it over, but I wasn't done. I turned to the guests. I spent the last decade keeping this family afloat, paid off debts, fixed credit, covered emergencies. And all I got in return was silence. Eye rolls, being treated like a donor instead of a brother. I looked at my parents. Enjoy the wine, enjoy the string quartet, because this is the last check you'll ever see from me. And I walked out. The whispers followed me, like falling dominoes. Someone gasped. My mom called my name, not angry, just stunned, like she couldn't fathom what I'd done. That was when it hit me. They truly didn't think they did anything wrong. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a role. The son who didn't complain, The one who had money? The one who always picked up the tab and never said a word. But I was done playing that part. What they didn't know, what made everything that followed possible, was that I hadn't just paid for the wedding. I had set things up with care. I had access. I had receipts. And I'd already made some quiet moves before the first guest arrived. Because this wasn't the end of a wedding. It was the beginning of a reckoning. I didn't go home that night. I'd booked a corner suite in a quiet hotel downtown the day before the wedding, not because I had plans to escape, but because something in my gut had been churning for weeks, like I knew deep down this day wouldn't go right, that whatever I'd buried, whatever I'd excused, was about to break loose. The suite was dim, serene. I sat by the floor-to-ceiling window with a glass of water in hand, watching the city light up like a silent fireworks show. I should have been furious. Maybe I was. But more than anything, I felt hollow, like someone had been slowly siphoning bits of me for years, and I'd finally realized the tank was bone dry. My phone buzzed. Missed calls from Mom, one from Ava, none from Jason. Of course not Jason. He was probably still dancing under the fairy lights, clinking glasses with old friends, assuming I'd cool off by morning, that I'd show up with the same smile, same willingness to fix everything he broke. But this time, I had a different script in mind. I opened my laptop, logged into the shared account I'd set up for the wedding expenses. Yes, shared. Jason and Ava were both authorized users, but I was the primary, the only one with final approval on transfers. Why? Because I'd learned. I'd been burned at too many times covering things off the books. This time, I needed a trail. Every bouquet, every tablecloth, every napkin and suit rental. My card. And it wasn't just paid, it was pending. I hovered over the pause all payments button. It asked, "Are you sure?" Yes, I was. The vendors hadn't been fully paid. The venue deposit was only that, a deposit. The caterers were still waiting. The band had received half. I'd made sure of that. Call it foresight, call it boundaries, call it war. Then I texted Miranda. Miranda's a lawyer. Sharp, relentless, and twice as salty as me. She's also the only person outside the family who truly understood what I'd put up with. I typed, "Everything went down. I'm freezing payments. Need to talk tomorrow." She replied in less than a minute, "About freaking time. I'll draft something that hurts, but legally." That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, my phone rang at 6:13 a.m. "Adam, Mom." Her voice was raspy. "Where are you?" "Why?" "Jason says you made a scene." "No," I said, calmly. "Dad made a scene." Silence. "You know how he is," she said eventually. "He was joking." "Don't call me sweetie," I cut in, "and don't pretend that was a joke." She paused, changed tactics. "Look, tensions were high. Jason's hurt. Ava's upset. Can we just— I'm not your bank anymore." Long silence. "Are you really going to leave your brother high and dry on his wedding day?" I actually laughed, bitter, short. I already paid for the champagne. Seems like a fitting toast. I hung up. By noon, the messages began. Ava first. "Hey Adam, can we talk?" Then I didn't know he was going to say that. "I'm so sorry." Then Jason, "We need you." That was rich. They didn't need me when they left me off the seating chart. They didn't need me when they mocked me in front of 150 guests. They didn't need me when they booked a $6,000 honeymoon suite in Santorini on my card. Yeah, that was next. I called the travel agency, canceled the booking, the deposit non-refundable. The rest never cleared. By 2 p.m., Jason called, "You canceled our honeymoon." "Yup. You're being insane. Man, that was low. You can't just—" "I didn't." "You did, when you laughed." He hesitated. "You know what Dad's like." "Yeah," I snapped. "And that's exactly why I'm finally doing something about it." I hung up. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. 3 years ago, my parents sold their old house, too much upkeep, too far from the hospital after Dad's heart scare. But what nobody knew was that they didn't sell it to a stranger. They sold it to me. I paid off their mortgage, cleared their debts, put the deed into a managed trust, my trust. They lived there rent-free, under one condition: no transfers, no major changes, and absolutely no gifting without my approval. A month before the wedding, over meatloaf, Dad casually said, "We're thinking of gifting the house to Jason and Ava. Start them off right." I blinked. "Why would you do that?" "Well, Jason's starting his life, needs stability. And you said you didn't want the house." "That's because I own it," I said flatly. He waved it off. "Semantics, it's all family. What I should have done then was shut it down. But part of me still clung to this naive hope that it was just talk, a dinner table fantasy. I was wrong. While I was funding their dream wedding, my parents were working behind my back trying to shift the deed into Jason and Ava's names, without my signature. So I forwarded Miranda's document to them. 2 pages outlining the legal impossibility of their plan. Any attempt to transfer ownership without trustee approval would be null, void, and if pushed fraudulent. Dad called me 38 minutes later. "You think you're being clever?" "No," I said. "You already humiliated me in front of 150 people. This is me being fair. You always take things so personally, and you never take anything seriously. You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being done." He didn't call again. Mom texted a rambling wall of half apologies and guilt trips. "We didn't mean it like that. You know your father's sense of humor. Ava feels awful. Please don't punish everyone over one moment." I didn't respond. Instead, I called the trust manager and asked him to notify everyone's certified letters only that the house remained in the trust. Any attempts to occupy, renovate, or transfer ownership would result in immediate legal action. But I didn't stop there, because if they thought the fallout from the wedding was bad, they had no idea what I had planned next. The letter to Jason hit his inbox the next day at 10:04 a.m. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. A formal notice of intent to collect repayment for the $40,000 loan I'd given him the year before, the one he called his can't-miss business opportunity, the gym, the smoothie bar, the place he swore would turn into a regional fitness brand within a year. He hadn't repaid a single dollar, never even tried, didn't return calls when I asked for an update, ignored emails, but you better believe he cashed the check fast enough. The letter, drafted by Miranda, was airtight, simple, legal. He had 30 days to pay in full or face civil litigation. Miranda even attached a copy of the original agreement he signed, complete with his smug little signature and a clause he'd clearly never read. Failure to repay would allow me to seize assets tied to the LLC, including physical property, equipment, and all intellectual property. Jason didn't respond, but the panic was setting in. That same afternoon, I received a call from the trust's property manager. "Hey Adam," he said. "Just a heads up, someone tried to submit a maintenance request to install a hot tub on the back deck of the house." "Jason?" I asked. "Yep, used your dad's old account." I laughed, actually laughed. "Decline it," I said, "and mark the account inactive." "You got it." They still didn't get it. They were still treating everything I provided, money, houses, favors, as if it were a bottomless buffet, as if all they had to do was show up, plate in hand, and take what they wanted. So I shut it all down. I logged into every account I'd once used to help them: Jason's gym credit line, Ava's student loan autopay, Mom's prescription refill card, the phone plan, the car insurance file, even the shared Netflix. Click, click, gone. The only message I sent afterward was to Ava. Short, direct. "You might want to look into your credit report." Because guess who had co-signed a few things under her name without asking? Yep, Jason. Guess who'd opened a business account and used her personal info to boost the loan application? Jason. I wasn't trying to ruin her. I actually felt a sliver of pity. But I wasn't going to shield her from the truth just because she stood beside him at the altar and laughed with everyone else when my father insulted me. Let them clean up their own mess for once. 3 days of silence passed. Then, finally, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Voicemail. I listened to it once, then twice, then played it for Miranda, just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. It was Jason, and he was crying. Not sobbing, not theatrical, just exhausted, scared, and trying desperately to sound like he still had some pride left. "Adam? Man, I know I screwed up. Okay, I know. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just smoothed it over with Ava, or covered the honeymoon somehow, or, I don't know, sold some stuff." Old. A pause, sniffling. "I was stupid, but I didn't mean for it to go like this. I didn't think you'd really go nuclear on me. I didn't think—" He trailed off, then forced a weak chuckle. "Mom's a wreck. Dad's pretending he's not freaking out, but he is. Ava, she's not even talking to me. She's staying with her parents." Another pause. "The gym's basically dead. I'm behind on payroll. We never had a plan. Man, I know that now. I just thought—" His voice cracked. "I just thought you'd always catch us." Click. It wasn't an apology. Not really. It was a confession of dependency. And they never saw me as family. They saw me as infrastructure. I poured myself a drink, nothing fancy, Just seltzer and lime, and sat back with the folder Jason had dropped at my door. I hadn't looked at it since that night. Now I opened it. There were receipts, spreadsheets, little yellow sticky tabs with scribbled notes like, "Adam covered this and Dad insisted on this vendor." One note read, "Ava thought this was from her parents. My fault." That one stung. Then the letter. It wasn't long, barely a page, but it was honest, clumsy, awkward, but honest. He admitted to being jealous of my business and my independence, my ability to say no. He said he admired it but resented it at the same time, that he let Mom and Dad's attitude toward me shape his own, that he was sorry not just for the wedding but for letting it get that far, for acting like I was just a wallet. I sat there for a long time, staring at that letter. It didn't change the facts. It didn't erase the years of neglect or the public humiliation, but it felt real. Still, the trust wasn't rebuilt just because the words were honest. Then, the next day, I got an email from the venue. Subject line: payment escalation, final notice. Apparently, Jason had tried to use one of the wedding cards still frozen to pay off the remaining balance. It failed. The venue coordinator was giving me 48 hours before sending the invoice to collections. So that was it. Jason hadn't come to apologize. He came to stall, to buy time, to save himself again, just like always on my dime. I called the venue. "This is Adam Knox. I'm the original point of contact for the wedding." "Yes, Mr. Knox," the coordinator said. "We've been trying to reach you. The payment. I'm not paying it." A pause. "I'm formally withdrawing from all responsibility. The beneficiaries, Jason Knox and Ava Lane, are the responsible parties. My financial role is over." She sounded surprised, but she nodded. "I understand. And one more thing," I added. "If they attempt to use any frozen card again, that's fraud. Just so we're clear." "Yes, sir." I hung up. Then I sat there, just breathing. The next move was the lawsuit. Miranda filed it 2 days later. Civil, clean, irrefutable. Breach of contract. Seizure of business assets. Legal costs to be covered by the defendant. It wasn't about crushing him. It was about consequences. Boundaries. By the end of the week, word got out. My mother left me a voicemail, rambling, tearful. "You're tearing this family apart. This isn't what family does." My dad didn't call. Just a text, "You'll regret this someday." I didn't reply. I printed the text out and taped it to the inside of Jason's folder. A reminder of why I was doing all this. Not for revenge, for peace, for dignity. And for the first time in my life, I felt both. 3 weeks passed. 3 gloriously silent weeks. No calls, no emails, no desperate knocks at my door. My parents had stopped trying to guilt-trip me. Jason had lawyered up but gone quiet. Ava hadn't so much as liked one of my social media posts. It was like they were finally understanding what done really meant. And I was thriving. I hired 2 new people at my company, took long walks in the evening, cooked actual meals instead of living on protein bars and stress. I even started planning a trip to Glacier National Park, something I'd talked about for years but never had the time for. Or rather, never had the freedom for. Then, without warning, it all came crashing back. On a Thursday morning, I arrived at my office to find a certified letter waiting for me. It was from Jason's new lawyer, a different one than before. Apparently, the last guy had dropped him after realizing Jason had no assets left to leverage. The new letter was desperate, a counteroffer. Jason was willing to pay back $10,000 in quarterly installments over the next 5 years. He wanted the lawsuit dropped, wanted all legal claims sealed. And get this, he wanted me to sign a non-disclosure preventing me from damaging his reputation further in our shared social circles. I laughed so hard I startled my assistant. Miranda, however, didn't laugh. She read the letter, raised an eyebrow, and said, "He's panicking. That's good. We press." So we did. Our response was polite, professional, and brutal full repayment. No delay, no non-disclosure. If he didn't comply, we'd proceed to court. Jason responded by ghosting us again. Until the eviction. See, what Jason didn't know, what none of them knew, was that their old house, the one my parents had gifted to Jason and Ava as a wedding present, was still legally mine. Not just mine, I'd quietly moved it from a family trust into a personal LLC 2 weeks after the wedding fiasco. I'd had enough foresight to make the transfer seamless, clean, irrevocable. And Jason, he'd been living there rent-free. I called the property manager, gave the green light. Eviction notices went out the next morning. By that evening, my phone exploded. Text from Jason. You're seriously kicking us out. Voicemail from Ava Adam. Please don't do this. We have nowhere else to go. Email from Mom. What happened to compassion? We're family. And then the cherry on top, a call from Dad. I answered, if only to hear what version of reality he was spinning today. You think you're a big man now, he snarled. You think this makes you powerful? No, I said calmly, it makes me free. He scoffed. You'll regret this. Blood is thicker than water. No, I replied. Blood is thicker than water when the bloodline acts like it matters. Yours doesn't. Click. I blocked his number. Then I called the locksmith and scheduled a full lock change on the property for the day after the eviction date. Jason had 10 days to vacate. Ava messaged me twice after that, once asking for more time, once offering to talk things through over coffee. I didn't respond. I didn't owe her anything, not after she'd watched her new husband humiliate me in front of 200 people and said nothing. On day 9, the property manager called me. They're gone, he said. Took some furniture. Left the guest room trashed. Looks like someone punched a hole in the bathroom wall. I didn't flinch. Send me the repair estimate. I said, we'll add it to the litigation packet. Got it. I visited the house a week later. Walked through every room. Touched the banister I'd paid to refinish. Looked out the window they'd once begged me to replace because it let in too much cold. Saw the dent in the kitchen tile where Jason had dropped a dumbbell by accident. And then I stood in the living room, took a deep breath and whispered, this is mine now. Not the house. The moment. The peace. The control. They'd taken it from me for years. Convinced me that love meant sacrifice. That family meant servitude. That success only mattered if it could be redistributed to cover someone else's failures. But they were wrong. Love doesn't demand silence. Family doesn't require self-erasure. And success, it isn't a communal pot. I left the house feeling lighter. And that should have been the end of it. But Jason, ever the master of dragging drama into fresh places, had one last stunt. He posted to Facebook a long, rambling and performative post about betrayal. About how some people were so threatened by love and success, they resorted to eviction and lawsuits. He painted Ava as the innocent, himself as the victim, me as the bitter brother who couldn't handle being left behind. The post ended with, but I believe in karma, and I believe family always finds its way back together. It was designed to spark sympathy. Instead, it backfired spectacularly, because people knew. They'd seen the wedding video, heard the speech, heard my speech. People remembered the mic drop, the way I walked out, the fallout that followed. Some even messaged me privately to say, good for you, that took guts. One cousin commented directly under Jason's post, pretty sure you owe Adam 6 figures. Dude, maybe focus on that. 10 more liked the comment. Jason deleted the post an hour later. And I posted nothing. I just watched the world spin without me needing to carry anyone else's weight. Watched their story unravel without my help. Watched the web they'd woven made of entitlement, manipulation, and self-delusion collapse under its own weight. And for once, I wasn't beneath it. I was above it. 6 months later, my condo feels too quiet. Not empty, just quiet in a way that doesn't ache anymore. Like a forest after a storm. There's damage, sure. Branches broken. Leaves scattered. But the air is cleaner. Calmer. That silence, it's earned. I won the lawsuit. Jason agreed to a structured repayment plan after the court froze what was left of his assets, about $13,000 in liquidation. Not much considering what he owed, but enough to hit where it hurt his ego. He didn't get to walk away clean, and that mattered more than the money. My parents, they never formally apologized. Instead, they sent a Christmas card. It had no note, just their names printed inside, as if they'd accidentally pressed order on a guilt-tinged Hallmark attempt at peace. I didn't reply. Ava reached out once, in February, a text. I left him. I know it's probably too late to say this, but I'm sorry. I really didn't know how bad it was. I read it, then deleted it, because I didn't need closure from her. I had already given that to myself the day I changed the locks on the house. And that's the thing. People think revenge means explosions, drama, courtroom scenes, and mic drops. But sometimes, the most powerful kind of revenge is just stillness. Choosing to not engage, to not pick up the phone, to let someone spiral alone in the mess they made instead of rushing in to clean it up, like always. That's what freedom tastes like. Still, it wasn't easy. There were moments, I won't lie, where I doubted myself. Days I looked at old photos of our family vacations and felt something twist in my chest. A little boy on the beach building sandcastles with a brother who, for a while, was his best friend. Parents smiling behind the camera, but nostalgia is a liar. It edits, it crops out the shouting, the guilt, the part where they always passed the emotional bill to me and called it just how family works. So I stopped letting the past hold the pen. I started writing my future with new ink. I reconnected with people I'd unintentionally pushed away during my years as the family fixer. A college friend named Jamie, who used to crash on my couch and bring homemade muffins from her failed bakery attempt, now sends me playlists and check-in texts weekly. She's the one who convinced me to try therapy. I was reluctant at first. Of course, thought I could muscle through. Turns out, muscles don't heal bruises you can't see. It took months of sessions before I said the words aloud I was used. Not just once, repeatedly, methodically. They didn't love me less, necessarily. They just loved me conditionally. As long as I was useful, as long as I said yes, as long as I smiled while bleeding, and when I stopped being family. That's what hit hardest. Realizing the people you'd have taken a bullet for weren't even holding the umbrella when it rained. But the other realization, that you survive anyway, that's what saved me. So I built new habits. Saturday mornings are for hikes, not errands, not repair bills for someone else's broken stuff. Sundays I read whole books in one sitting. I've picked up photography, landscapes mostly, peaceful things, places with no people in them. I donated the last remaining shared account, $1,432.67, to a local charity that provides mental health services for survivors of toxic family systems. Wrote in honor of freedom in the memo line. Felt right. Somewhere in my closet, the folder Jason slid under my door still exists. I haven't thrown it away, not because I'm clinging to the past, but because it reminds me of the moment I stopped waiting for an apology and started acting like I mattered. Every time I see it, I remember you don't have to keep bleeding to prove you were cut. And if anyone reading this is stuck, if your family only calls when they need something, if they mock your boundaries, if they see your success as a shared bank account rather than a personal triumph, know this. Now you're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to lock the door. You're allowed to choose peace, even if it makes them uncomfortable. Especially if it makes them uncomfortable. 6 months later, I'm still learning. Still unlearning too. The instinct to flinch when someone asks for just a quick favor, the knee-jerk guilt when I say no, it's a process, but it's mine now. And that's enough. I'm not the family ATM anymore. I'm Adam. And for the first time in my life, I feel whole. Story 2. People often say blood is thicker than water. I used to believe it, or at least I pretended to. Family was supposed to be the one thing that never cracked, no matter what. But that illusion shattered one night at my sister Sarah's housewarming party. It wasn't just any party. It was the one I had basically paid for. A few months earlier, Sarah had called me out of the blue, tears in her voice, saying she needed a fresh start. She wanted to settle down, buy a house, and finally grow the hell up. As she put it, she was so dramatic, pacing on my porch with mascara streaked down her cheeks, like a soap opera character. Of course, she didn't have enough for a down payment. The bank was giving her one chance, and she begged me for a little push to get over the finish line. That push ended up being $60,000. This wasn't just my money, it was the money Megan and I had been saving for years. Skipping vacations, eating cheap, putting off home repairs. We'd planned to use it for ourselves, maybe a house, maybe a business, but I talked myself into lending it to Sarah. Megan hated the idea but trusted me. She said, if she stiffs us, I'll never forgive her. I told her, she won't. I vouched for Sarah. I should have known better. The night of the party, the house was packed. Sarah hadn't even formally invited us, just sent a group text like we were an afterthought. Megan wanted to skip it, but I insisted we show up. Maybe part of me still hoped Sarah would acknowledge what we'd done for her, at least once. Instead, we were greeted like delivery people. No hugs, no thank yous, just a fake smile and a cold, oh, you made it. The party was over-the-top expensive catering, a DJ, champagne fountains, and a cheesy LED sign on the wall that read, Boss Era. Megan nudged me and whispered, how did she afford all this? I already knew. She was using our money not just for the house, but to throw a party celebrating herself, as if she'd won the lottery. I stood at the edge of the yard watching people toast her like she'd cured cancer. Then she grabbed a microphone, climbed onto a chair, and raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said, "and to the elimination of dead weight, because some people in your life hold you back. They drag you down. Sometimes they pretend to help, but really they just want to control you. But not anymore." Her eyes locked onto mine. "I don't need you anymore. Ryan, you're just a loser who thinks money makes him important. But guess what? I've got my house. I've got my life. And I'm done acting like I owe you anything." The crowd laughed. Our mom giggled like she heard a cute joke. Dad didn't even blink. My uncles raised their glasses. I saw one cousin whisper, "Damn." Megan looked at me like she wanted to burn the place down. I didn't say a word. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I just walked away. I didn't go home to sulk. I went home to work. What Sarah never learned was that I didn't just have money. I had leverage. Developers, realtors, bankers, I knew people. The same week she was approved for that loan, I got a copy of the paperwork. It listed me as a donor on the loan. That's not charity, that's control. While she was basking in borrowed glory, I made calls. I made it clear Sarah's situation had changed. I don't like playing dirty, but I wasn't going to be the family clown anymore. A week later, Sarah lost the house, papers revoked, financing pulled, the seller backed out. She had no idea what hit her, but I did. That was just the beginning. I thought she'd call right away, but she didn't. Her pride wouldn't let her. Instead, for days, she posted Instagram photos like nothing was wrong. Captions like, "New beginnings are just the start of my empire." She even posted stories from another house, like she was already shopping for an upgrade. Smoke and mirrors. Illusions bought with borrowed time. But the walls closed in fast. By the third day, the messages started. First, a text, "Sarah, have you heard anything about the loan? Something weird is going on." I left it on read. Then the voicemail started, half crying, half yelling about clerical errors, unfair treatment, sabotage. For the first time all week, I smiled. Megan walked into the room while I was playing one message. She said, "Good," and went back to folding laundry. On the fifth day, Sarah drove to our house. She didn't knock at first, just sat in her car for 10 minutes, like she was rehearsing what she was about to say. When she finally rang the bell, Megan answered but didn't let her inside. She stood firm in the doorway. I stayed in the kitchen not because I didn't want to see her, but because I wanted her to feel like she had to ask, and she did. "Ryan," she said, voice shaky, "please, can we talk? Just 5 minutes? I swear I didn't mean it. I didn't know. I need another chance." I walked over and leaned against the doorframe. "Another chance for what?" "To make it right." "You already made it right," I told her. "You made it perfectly clear I'm a loser who means nothing to you." I heard it from her own mouth. Tears fell. Real ones this time. She said she was drunk. She said she was performing for the crowd. She said it got out of hand. She said she didn't mean any of it. "But you meant it when you said you wouldn't pay me back, right?" I asked. She froze. That silence said it all. I told her I didn't need another apology. I needed her to stay off my porch and figure out her life without dragging me into it again. She tried to step forward, said we were family, said I couldn't just walk out on her. That's when Megan closed the door. I thought that was the end of it. But Sarah doesn't go away quietly. Within days, she'd turned the whole family against me. Mom called furious. "You're punishing your sister at the worst time of her life. She's hurting. You have to forgive her." I told her no. Dad said I was being cold. That's not how family works. I asked him where he was when Sarah humiliated me in front of everyone. He didn't answer. Our parents have savings, a retirement nest egg, but they wouldn't give her a dime. "It's different when it's your kid," Mom said. "Exactly," I said. "I'm not her parent. I'm not her crutch. And I'm done cleaning up after people who stabbed me in the back." I told them all I'm out. They could choose sides. I wasn't playing a family that thought loyalty meant being walked over. Sarah's spiral wasn't over, not even close. Sarah's downfall was not just emotional, it started to seep into every corner of her life. The glamorous image she projected crumbled faster than anyone expected. Weeks after the house was lost, Jenna, one of our cousins who usually stayed out of family drama, sent me a message that stopped me cold. "Ryan," she wrote simply, "Sarah's living in a motel behind the gas station. It's so bad even the clerk keeps his distance." I stared at my phone. The same sister who just weeks ago, was popping champagne in a $700 velvet jumpsuit, was now reduced to ghosting from motel rooms, posting cryptic quotes about rising from ashes. She'd deleted every photo from the housewarming party, every last one, like it never happened. Then came the GoFundMe. The headline was dramatic. "Please help me rebuild after a housing scam." Her story was dripping with heartbreak and deception. She said she'd been manipulated by a corrupt system and was now on the verge of homelessness. Not one word about the $60,000 gift. Not a single mention of humiliating me in front of 30 people, calling me a loser. In her version, I didn't exist. Unless she was talking to family, in which case, I was the jealous brother who orchestrated her downfall. She asked for $100,000. She got $312. Mostly from bots offering crypto loans. Megan showed me the page, quietly scrolling through it. "Should we report this for fraud?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. We both knew what Sarah was doing. She was playing every angle: victim, warrior, survivor, anything to avoid looking in the mirror. What broke me wasn't just her lies. I expected those. It was how many people in our family started to believe them. Mom called, voice sharp. You're punishing your sister at the worst time of her life." I told her Sarah was a grown woman who'd made her choices. "If you're so concerned, maybe you could write her a check." Silence. Then the usual excuses. "We don't have that kind of money. We're on fixed incomes." I reminded them. So was I before I gave my savings to the favorite daughter. Mom and Dad could afford 2 cruises a year. But suddenly, when it came to helping Sarah, "It's different when it's your kid," Mom said, except it wasn't about money. It was about control. They hated that I wasn't in the game anymore. To them, being family meant swallowing every insult and smiling while they poured salt in the wound. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. The more I stayed silent, the louder Sarah became. She spun stories about me ruining her life, punishing her for shining too bright. She painted me as a bitter shadow, hiding behind spreadsheets, unable to handle her glow. She even texted Megan. "I know he's hurting, but please talk to him. Deep down, he knows this isn't right." Megan blocked her immediately. 3 weeks after the party, Sarah showed up at my door. No warning, no phone call, just a knock at 10 p.m. I peeked through the peephole. There she was, hunched on the stoop like a kid caught stealing. Her hair was a mess. Her hoodie swallowed her. Her face was hollow, not sad, not sorry, just spent. I didn't open the door. I stood silent and watched her breathe, as if every exhale hurt. After a few minutes, she looked up, not at the peephole, but at the sky. Loud enough for me to hear. She said, "If this hadn't happened, I'd still be your sister." Not that she was sorry, not that she admitted she screwed up, just that maybe I'd let her back in. I stayed in the doorway. Megan came out silently from the kitchen. "You're right," I told Sarah. "If nothing had happened, maybe. But a real sister wouldn't need everything to go right just to act like family." Sarah didn't argue, didn't cry. I think that for the first time, she understood. Or maybe she just ran out of lies. She turned and walked back to her car. Megan stood next to me. We watched the taillights disappear into the night. She said quietly, "You did the right thing." For the first time since this nightmare began, I believed it. But karma doesn't always end when someone hits the ground. Sometimes it swings back for another hit. Sarah's story wasn't over. 3 weeks passed. Megan and I settled into quiet routines. Work, cooking dinner, resuming renovations we'd put on hold. Life felt normal again. Better, even. The only trace of Sarah was the occasional passive-aggressive message from family. "You don't give up blood, Ryan. Don't let pride make you someone you're not. Your parents are getting older. You'll regret this." I ignored everyone, but I knew something was coming. Sarah had been silent too long, and she never stayed silent. Then, the next blow wasn't from her. It came from a lawyer. One afternoon, I found an official-looking envelope at work. Inside was a notice Sarah was pursuing legal action. She claimed the $60,000 wasn't a gift. It was an investment, an oral agreement. I laughed loud enough for my coworkers to turn. At home, Megan read the letter twice and said simply, "She's crazy." It didn't take long to shut the case down. I sent our lawyer everything: texts, bank records, wire receipts, all clearly marked as gifts. Sarah insisted on that, to keep the loan paperwork clean. The case was garbage. She knew it. But it wasn't about winning. It was about stirring the pot. The next week, Jenna texted me. "She's pregnant." Sarah was pregnant. It didn't register at first. Pregnant on what money? Living in a motel? Eating leftover pizza crusts? And she thought now was the time to bring a baby into the world. Megan looked at me, then down at her phone. Don't let her use this to worm back in. I didn't say anything. We both knew what was coming. Days later, I got a text. Ryan, I didn't know who else to turn to. Please. It's not about me anymore. It's about the baby. That was her hook. Her new angle? If guilt didn't work, maybe pity would. Maybe she thought I'd melt at the thought of a tiny human caught in the chaos. Years ago, maybe I would have. But this wasn't about a baby. It was manipulation, rebranded and dressed in softer colors. I didn't respond. Not right away. I waited until morning. Then I sent it back. I am not your safety net. I'm not your ATM. And I'm definitely not your backup plan. Don't bring a child into this world just to use him the way you used everyone else. She didn't respond. For the first time in months, she was silent. But silence didn't mean peace. It meant she was planning something else. And I had a feeling I hadn't seen the worst yet. People like Sarah don't change. They adapt, morph into whatever role will get them sympathy. But underneath, they're the same. She wasn't looking for salvation. She was looking for an opening. When she announced she was pregnant, that was her next play. The news spread quickly, not from her, of course. She still had enough pride to avoid texting me. But the family grapevine worked fast. Jenna told Megan first, almost like a warning. Mom left a voicemail. I hope this softens your heart a little. It didn't. Sarah was living with a guy named Troy. No one really knew much about him. What Jenna said was enough. He had a sketchy past, 3 kids he barely saw. But he had a couch, and that made him a saint in Sarah's world. She bounced between his place and random friends' couches. No job, no plan, just Instagram quotes about growth and resilience. Meanwhile, quietly begging Megan with texts like, "It's so hard without family support." Or, "I never thought I'd have to do this alone." Classic Sarah, passive-aggressive, manipulative. One morning, Megan showed me her latest post. A selfie with puffy eyes, no makeup, a hospital wristband visible on her arm. Caption: "Some things are too painful for words. Heaven gained an angel today." I didn't respond. I scrolled through the comments, mostly strangers, a few family members. One said, "So sorry, sweet girl, you're stronger than she ever was." That was meant for me. I didn't sleep that night. Not heartbreak, not sadness, just a low hum of disgust. She had already turned tragedy into a campaign. Her new identity, victim and grieving mother. She wore it like armor. I didn't reply. I didn't text. I didn't open her messages. But 5 days later, another knock came. It was Dad. I hadn't seen him since the housewarming party. Since he stood silently while Sarah torched me in front of everyone, now he stood on my porch like nothing happened. No call, no warning, just standing there like he had some moral high ground to reclaim. I didn't invite him in. "She's in the hospital," he said. "She lost the baby. There were complications. She's not doing well." I waited. Then he added, "She's asking for you." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so predictably sad. That's Sarah. Burn every bridge, then show up with a matchbox asking for help. "You want me to go see her?" I asked. "She needs family." "Ryan," he said, "she's broken." "No," I said, "she's not broken. She's just out of people to use." He flinched, like I'd crossed a sacred line. But I wasn't finished. She humiliated me, lied to everyone, kept the money, refused to pay it back. "And you stood there and watched?" "She's hurting," he said. "So am I," I replied. "But you only seem to care about hers." There was a long silence. Like he thought if he waited, my heart would melt. But it didn't. She said if things hadn't happened, she'd still be my sister. He said she meant it. I shook my head. If she was ever my sister, she wouldn't have needed things to go a certain way, to act like family. "She's alone." "No," he said. "She's finally feeling what it's like to live without leverage. She's not the victim. She's out of ammunition." He turned to leave. At the end of the driveway, he said without looking back, "You'll regret this one day." I closed and locked the door. Later, Megan came in and handed me a coffee. She didn't ask what had been said. She just said, "I'm proud of you." For the first time since it all started, I believed I wasn't the cruel one. I wasn't the selfish one. I had just stopped volunteering. To be everyone else's doormat, let them gossip. Let them spin stories. I wasn't bending anymore. And Sarah, she still hadn't hit bottom. Months passed. Sarah vanished like smoke from a fire. No calls, no texts, no social media updates. It was as if she'd finally run out of places to hide. Megan and I tried to move on. Really move on this time. We finished the renovations we'd shelved for months, new kitchen counters, Fresh paint, that office nook where I could work without distraction. The small victories felt like a new life carving its way out of the rubble. We took a weekend trip to Sedona, watching the sun rise over red rocks and vast skies. Megan said quietly, "I don't miss the noise." I felt the same. The chaos that had consumed years of my life was finally fading. But even in the silence, Sarah's shadow lingered. Then, one afternoon, an unmarked envelope slid under my door. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Sarah. Her handwriting was the same messy, rushed, like she was trying to trap her feelings on paper before they escaped. It wasn't an apology, not really, more like a confession drenched in self-pity. She said she was sorry. She kept softening it, hedging her regret. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she wrote. That things spiraled and got out of control. She admitted she lost the baby, that the father vanished before she left the hospital, that she'd spent weeks alone in a shelter, trying to wean herself off the painkillers they gave her after surgery. She said she didn't blame me anymore, but she hoped I'd understand why she did what she did. The line that cut deepest was this: "If things hadn't happened the way they did, maybe I'd still be your sister." That's the thing about family. It doesn't have to prove itself every time. Even in the end, Sarah couldn't just say, "I was wrong. I ruined everything." She left the door cracked open, leaving room for blame to be shared. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. A few weeks later, Jenna texted me again. Sarah had left town. No goodbyes. No forwarding address. Just gone. Maybe Seattle? Maybe Montana? No one knew. Our parents. They didn't say it aloud anymore, but I could hear it in their voices during the brief holiday visits. I saw it in the cold shoulders, the short silences. They called it pride. They said I'd let my ego get in the way of forgiveness, like I'd murdered something sacred. But the truth, I just stopped trying to resuscitate what was already dead. They had their chances. They watched Sarah stab me in the back, and they said nothing, pretended everything was fine. They chose comfort over character, and I was done carrying their weight. Megan and I had a son the next year. We named him Caleb. I held him in the hospital room, watched his tiny chest rise and fall, and I promised him something I'd never said before. I wouldn't raise him to believe blood was the only thing that mattered. I would teach him loyalty, not obligation. Limits, not guilt. Love is earned. Respect is earned. And family, the real kind, doesn't ask you to burn yourself just to keep it warm. I haven't seen Sarah since, but sometimes I think about her. Not with anger, not with sadness, just as a reminder of how far we're willing to go for people who wouldn't cross the street for us, and how sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. Life after Sarah felt like waking up from a long nightmare. The weight that had pressed down on me for years was finally lifting. Without her constant drama and my family's chaos pulling me in, I found space to breathe. Megan and I settled into a rhythm. Caleb grew fast, laughing, crawling, discovering the world with wide eyes and boundless curiosity. Watching him, I realized how much I wanted to be different from the family I came from. Not just in what I said, but in what I showed him. We created a home that was ours, not perfect, not magazine-worthy, but filled with calm and love. We planted a small garden in the backyard. I built Caleb a tiny sandbox where he could dig without worry. Megan painted his nursery a soft green, the color of fresh leaves. My phone rarely buzzed with family drama anymore. Instead, I got texted from friends who'd been there for me, people who didn't expect anything but gave everything. The support felt real. It wasn't about blood or obligation. It was about choosing to show up. Sometimes, I caught myself thinking about Sarah, wondering if she was really okay, if she had found any kind of peace. But the truth was, I didn't need her in my life. I didn't need the chaos. I needed to heal. I started therapy, something I had put off for years. Talking to someone who didn't know my family gave me a new perspective. I began to unravel the knots of guilt and shame that had tied me down. I learned that saying no doesn't make you cruel. It makes you human. The hardest part was accepting that some people never change. Sarah wasn't the only one who expected me to carry their burdens. My parents still held on to the fantasy of what we were supposed to be, but I had stepped off that stage. I refused to play a part in their play anymore. One holiday season, and my parents came by. Not to visit, just to drop off a box of things Sarah left behind. The moment was awkward and silent. I didn't invite them in. I thanked them quietly and closed the door. That night, Megan and I sat with Caleb asleep between us. I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. No resentment, no anger, just the quiet satisfaction of living my truth. People often ask me if I regret walking away, if I wish things had been different. Sometimes, I think about how things could have been, but then I remember that some families are built on sand. No matter how much you build, it can all wash away. I've learned to build something stronger, something real. Megan and I are planning our future carefully. We talk about teaching Caleb boundaries, how to love without losing himself, how to stand firm when people try to pull him under. I'm dating again, slowly, no rush, no pressure. Just two people growing together. It feels different when you don't carry someone else's baggage. I still get messages from relatives, distant and uncertain. They ask if I'll come back, if I'll forgive. I don't reply. Not because I'm cruel, but because I'm whole. I don't need to prove that to anyone. The last time I checked, Sarah's social media was silent. No new posts, no cries for help. Maybe she's rebuilding. Maybe she's finally free of the chaos too. I hope so, because at the end of the day, I want everyone to find peace, even those who broke me. But for me, peace came when I stopped running back, when I finally stood still. And now I live for me, for Megan, for Caleb, for the family I chose. That's the real ending, not the fights, not the betrayal, but the quiet, unshakable freedom of walking away from what no longer serves you. Story 3. I landed just before 7 a.m., dragging exhaustion and airport coffee with me. 9 hours on a cramped overnight flight, no sleep, no rest, and definitely no grand expectations. I wasn't flying back for some dramatic family reunion or to patch up old wounds. That ship sailed long ago. This trip was for one reason: my grandparents, 40 years married. They were the only people in that house who ever saw me as more than a disappointment. I kept the trip a secret, didn't tell a soul, just booked the tickets, slid them into a silver envelope, and headed to the house I swore I'd never set foot in again. Before I could even knock properly, the door swung open. There stood my dad, arms crossed, a sneer playing on his lips. Well, the loser wants to be family again," he said, voice dripping with mockery, as if I should drop to my knees and beg forgiveness right there on the porch. I said nothing. Before I could even react, Mom appeared, arms folded, already bristling. "You can sleep in the yard," she added flatly. I smiled, pulling the envelope from my pocket. Slowly, I opened it and held out the tickets. Mediterranean cruise, balcony suite, all-inclusive. I had even upgraded their flights. Their faces went from smug amusement to stunned silence in a heartbeat. Mom's eyes welled with tears. Dad's jaw dropped like he'd been hit. I let the silence hang. Then, quietly but firmly, I said, "None, this is for real family, not for you." And I walked past them, bag slung over my shoulder. The house still felt like mine in some twisted way. Near the stairs, I dropped my bag and heard Mom whisper my name like it was a prayer. Then Grandma shuffled down the steps, in her faded robe and slippers. Her eyes lit up the second she saw me, and I swear I felt like a kid again. Grandpa was right behind her, squinting as if he couldn't believe it was really me. "Is that Liam? Is that really you?" he kept asking, a smile tugging at his lips. I hugged them both, handed over the envelope, and wished them a happy anniversary. Grandma's hands trembled as she unfolded the tickets. She said nothing at first, just covered her mouth in awe. Grandpa looked over the itinerary 3 times, then said, "You shouldn't have, but thank you." By 10 a.m., the house buzzed with life. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors all arriving one by one, each with flowers, food, or both. Laughter filled the kitchen. Someone brought homemade cake. Champagne flowed in mismatched glasses. That kind of family chaos usually drove me nuts, but today it felt right. My parents, however, sat off to the side like spectators, barely speaking. They didn't help serve, didn't say thank you, didn't pretend to be proud. Later that night, after most guests had left, Dad cornered me near the guest room. "You caused a circus," he accused. "I'm just stirring the pot," he added, voice low but sharp. Mom joined in, telling me I embarrassed them. "If you cared, you could have just sent money," she said. I looked them both in the eye. "I didn't fly across the country to fight," I said. "I'm not staying long anyway." Dad's reply was cold, final. "If you won't stay under our roof respectfully, then maybe you shouldn't stay here at all." I said nothing. I packed my things quietly. Called my cousin Nolan. He picked up on the second ring. "Need a place to crash. I've got an air mattress and cold beer waiting." 20 minutes later, I was out the door. Nolan's place was small, messy, smelled like motor oil and weed, but I slept like a rock. He gave me the futon in his spare room. The next morning, over cereal from chipped coffee cups, he asked what happened. I told him everything: the tickets, my parents' sneers, their fake outrage. He laughed so hard he nearly choked on his Lucky Charms. "You're the villain in their story now," he said. "Fine, let them keep rewriting the script." The next few days, I focused on my grandparents. Breakfast dates, helping Grandpa fix his old truck, sitting with Grandma as she sorted through dusty photo albums. They picked which pictures to bring on the cruise. Not once did my parents show, not even when the family gathered for dinner that weekend. On day 5, I dropped off a travel pillow for Grandma. Before I reached the porch, Dad appeared. "Thought you'd come crawling back," he sneered. I ignored him, placed the package on the porch, and turned to leave. He followed me out. You're poisoning the family. Have you done anything for them lately?" I asked. He scoffed, said I didn't understand what it took to keep the house running. I told him I'd managed my own life. 2 states over, just fine. Then he said something that stopped me cold. "You don't even live with your family. You sleep on couches like a stray." I left without another word. I called Nolan. "I'm gone for a few hours. I just drove. No destination. Just roads and silence." I ended up by the lake where Grandpa took me fishing as a kid. Sat there until sunset, thinking how small people get when you stop needing their approval. The next morning, a text from Mom. "You really should stop dragging the family into this." I forwarded it to Nolan. "Remind me why I left the state," I wrote. His reply: "Therapy's cheaper when you don't live with crazy people." By day 7, Grandma and Grandpa were packing. They were excited, bought new luggage. Grandpa insisted on bringing his straw hat, his lucky hat. Grandma admitted she hadn't been this happy since their wedding day. That night, Dad texted me, "You're banned from the house. Don't come back." I screenshotted it and sent it to Aunt Melissa. She called furious. "I'll handle it," she said. I told her not to bother. They made it clear I was just returning the favor. What they didn't know? The cruise wasn't the only surprise I planned. Day 9, Grandpa honked outside Nolan's. There they were, ready to board the ship. Mom and Dad still at home, watching but unable to stop us. Grandma called me inside. "You get the suitcase." I grabbed it, hearing Mom's angry protests, but Grandpa reminded them. "He's not taking, he's giving." That night, I joined the pre-cruise celebration with family. Grandma handed me a folded note. "Don't open until we're gone." Day 10, the real goodbye. Family hugged, took photos, said their goodbyes. Parents absent. Grandpa joked about trying every dessert. Grandma and Grandpa beamed hand in hand, and when they returned, something was different. Mom and Dad were caught rifling through Grandma's things. Grandma's voice was steady. "You went through our things." Mom stammered. Dad lied. Grandma showed the proof. A long talk followed, calm, pointed, unavoidable. Grandpa ended it with a firm decision. "We're changing the locks." I left that day with a hug from my grandparents and a silent, satisfied goodbye. Dad shouted after me, "Think that makes you better than us." I didn't turn. "No," I said, "just better." And just like that, I closed the last page of a book I never wanted to finish. The days after Grandma and Grandpa left were quieter than I expected. The house felt empty, not just because they were gone, but because the tension lingered like a thick fog. I stayed at Nolan's. Though part of me wanted to face the mess head on, the house was still theirs. And my parents treated it like a battlefield. I was the invader. But now, I had Grandma's key, a symbol. Really, not just permission to enter, but a reminder that I wasn't some outsider anymore. Mom and Dad didn't waste time. The first morning after the cruise, I woke up to a barrage of calls from unknown numbers. I didn't pick up. Texts followed thinly veiled threats. Guilt trips disguised as concern and endless accusations. "Why are you turning against us?" one read. "You're tearing this family apart. Think of your grandparents, how could you?" I deleted most without a second thought, but some got under my skin. One message was from Aunt Melissa. "I'm sorry, Liam. They're trying to rewrite history, but I see what you're doing. You're standing up for what's right." Her words meant more than I let on. Melissa was one of the few in the family who didn't buy into the chaos. But even she was walking a tightrope, torn between loyalty to her siblings and the truth she couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, the house became a war zone. Mom and Dad disappeared for hours, sometimes whole days, only to return exhausted and defensive. Rumors started swirling among the neighbors' stories of frantic searches through drawers, whispered arguments in dark corners, and a family unraveling. One afternoon, Nolan and I went over to check on the place. The front lawn was overgrown, the paint peeling. Inside, it smelled stale, like memories left to rot. Mom had left a note on the kitchen table, half apology, half demand. "We need to talk. Family is family." I stared at it, laughed bitterly, then tore it up. Family was more than blood, I reminded myself. At the same time, I was juggling calls from Grandma and Grandpa, who were glowing from the cruise but worried about what was happening back home. Grandpa's voice was firm when he said, "They've lost their way, Liam, but you haven't." His words became a lifeline on the days the loneliness crept in. I spent evenings sitting with Grandma on the phone, listening to stories from decades ago, tales of hardship, resilience, and love that survived despite everything. It made me wonder how my parents had gotten so lost. Then came the surprise that knocked me sideways. About a week after the cruise, I received a thick envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a packet of documents, clearly from a lawyer. Sarah, my younger cousin, was suing, not me, but Grandma and Grandpa's estate. She claimed my grandparents had promised her the house long ago, that the money and care she gave them entitled her to ownership. I read the papers twice, then a third time just to be sure. This was a slap in the face. Sarah wasn't just stirring the pot, she was trying to rewrite the entire story. I called Aunt Melissa immediately. "She's lost it," Melissa said, anger and sadness mingling in her voice. "She's gambling with everything just to make a point." Our lawyer assured us the case was weak, more about noise and drama than law. Still, it shook me. What kind of family fights over love and legacy, like it's a business deal? The court dates loomed, but what hurt more was the personal attack. Sarah began sending texts to family and friends, painting herself as the victim. "I'm fighting for what's mine." One message read, "Liam's just trying to keep us all down." It was hard not to feel the sting. For a moment, I wondered if I was the villain. But then I remembered the nights I spent helping Grandma through surgery, the mornings fixing Grandpa's truck, the afternoons listening to their stories. I wasn't the villain, I was the only one standing up. As the weeks passed, my parents sank deeper into their own chaos. Bills went unpaid. The house fell into disrepair. Neighbors whispered. Mom's health seemed to decline, and Dad's temper grew shorter. I kept my distance but stayed vigilant. I wasn't going to let this family burn without doing everything I could to save what mattered. One evening, Nolan and I sat on his porch, beers in hand, watching the sunset behind the trees. "I never thought it'd get this bad," I said quietly. He nodded. "Sometimes, the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most." His words hit home. I realized this wasn't just about property or money. It was about breaking a cycle of families stuck in patterns of resentment and silence. With that in mind, I decided to take a different approach. I started gathering everything: photos, messages, receipts, building a record not just for the court, but for myself. Proof that I had given, supported, and cared when no one else did. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted the truth to be seen. Then, a surprise from an unexpected place. One afternoon, Aunt Melissa called. "There's a family meeting," she said. "Not your parents or Sarah. The others want to hear your side." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this fractured family could start to heal. The meeting was tense but honest. No shouting, no blame. Just people who had been hurt, confused, and lost, finally talking. I shared my story, not as a lecture but as a testimony. To the years of quiet sacrifice, the moments of pain, the hope that maybe one day family could mean more than blood. By the end, something shifted. Not everything was fixed, but cracks appeared in the walls of silence. I left that night feeling lighter. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time, I wasn't walking it alone. After the family meeting, things didn't magically fix themselves, if anything. The silence that followed was heavier, but at least it wasn't cold. It was different, a fragile truce. I stayed at Nolan's place for a while longer, my sanctuary from the storm, but inside me, the fight wasn't over. One morning, as I was scrolling through emails, I saw the first official court notice. Sarah had followed through on her threat to sue for part of Grandma and Grandpa's estate. The documents were full of legal jargon, but the intent was clear: she wanted a piece of what wasn't hers. I forwarded the notice to our lawyer, who reassured me it was a weak case. "She's throwing punches in the dark," he said, but that didn't stop the sting. More troubling was how family members started picking sides. Some called or texted, asking me to reconsider, to put the family first. Others quietly showed their support but didn't want to get involved. I realized the damage was deeper than I thought. The fractures had run through years of lies and silences. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into projects, finding solace in deadlines and meetings, but even there, the stress found me. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated but answered. Liam, it's Jenna. Jenna was Sarah's childhood friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Her voice was soft but urgent. I wanted to tell you what Sarah's been saying about you. It's not true. She paused. She's scared. She's desperate, but you're not the villain. That call hit me hard. For so long, I'd worried the worst, that Sarah's stories had poisoned everyone's minds. But hearing it from someone who knew her gave me a flicker of hope. Around the same time, I got an unexpected visit. Aunt Melissa showed up at Nolan's with a stack of old photo albums and boxes of letters. We need to preserve this, she said. We spent hours going through faded pictures of Grandma and Grandpa's early days. Handwritten letters full of dreams and struggles, the simple moments that made a family. It was bittersweet. These were the pieces of a family I barely recognized, the parts hidden beneath the bitterness and blame. Melissa confided quietly, this is what they're fighting over, memories and legacies, but it's not worth losing each other over. Then came the day of the court hearing. I dressed carefully, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Sarah's lawyer argued her case with passion, painting a picture of entitlement and betrayal. But our lawyer was calm, presenting clear evidence: wire transfers marked gift, text messages where Sarah thanked me, photos from family gatherings showing the support I'd given. It was dry, legal, but the truth shone through. The judge dismissed Sarah's claim. It was a relief, but it didn't erase the emotional scars. Back at home, my phone buzzed nonstop. Some family members reached out, apologizing for the silence and distance. Others avoided me altogether. I wasn't sure what I wanted: forgiveness, closure, revenge. Mostly, I wanted peace, the kind that comes when you finally stand up for yourself and don't look back. One evening, I took a walk by the lake, the same spot Grandpa and I used to fish. The sun was setting, painting the sky with oranges and purples. I sat on a bench, thinking about everything that had happened. About how family isn't just blood or shared history. It's the people who stand with you when the world turns its back. That night, I called Grandma. Her voice was warm and steady. We're proud of you, Liam, she said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The months that followed were slow but steady. I reconnected with a few cousins, building bridges carefully. Melissa remained a steadfast ally, sending updates and encouragement. My parents, they retreated further, retreating into their own world of denial. But I was no longer waiting for them. I was building my own life with honesty, boundaries, and hope. I even started dating again. Not out of loneliness, but because I realized I deserved companionship that wasn't tangled in family drama. I wasn't looking for a savior or someone to fix me, just someone to walk beside me. There were setbacks, of course, days when the past crept in like shadows, memories of hurt and betrayal. But I faced them head on. Therapy helped me unravel the knots of guilt and resentment. I learned to say no without feeling selfish, to protect my peace without feeling guilty. Then, one quiet afternoon, I received a package. Inside was a small, handmade scrapbook from Grandma, filled with pictures, notes, and a final message. Family is not perfect, but love endures. Thank you for being the one who stayed true. We love you always. I held it close and felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years. As I closed the scrapbook, I realized this story wasn't just about loss or betrayal. It was about resilience, about learning that sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do, and that real family shows up not just for the good times, but when no one else does. The months after the court case settled into a strange kind of calm. I wasn't sure if it was peace or just exhaustion, but I welcomed it all the same. Life started to look different. I moved into a new apartment, small but mine. No shared walls with family, no silent judgments behind closed doors. The first night in my new place, I made coffee, sat by the window, and let the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. For the first time, the silence wasn't lonely. I kept in touch with Grandma and Grandpa regularly. Their calls were my lifeline: stories about the garden, little victories, plans for their next visit. They never once brought up the family drama unless I did. Instead, they reminded me to live my life, to find joy in the small things. One afternoon, that Grandpa sent me a photo of his garden, blooming wildflowers in all colors. Here's a little sunshine for you, the message said. I reconnected with a few cousins, slowly repairing old wounds. Some were hesitant, still caught in family loyalties and old narratives, but others welcomed me with open arms, eager for honesty and a fresh start. One cousin, Rachel, shared her own story of feeling caught between sides. We talked late into the night about loyalty, expectations, and the courage it takes to break free. Work was steady but less consuming now. I learned to set boundaries, to say no when something wasn't right. I found balance, and I even started dating again, something I hadn't done seriously in years. It wasn't about filling a void, but about sharing my life with someone who respected my past and embraced my future. Sarah disappeared from social media completely after a while. I heard bits and pieces that she'd moved across the country, that she was trying to rebuild. No one knew exactly where. Sometimes I wondered if she ever thought about the family she lost. But mostly, I tried not to dwell on it. The past was a closed door. Then, one late spring day, I got a letter in the mail, no return address. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. It was from Sarah. I unfolded the pages slowly, heart pounding. She wrote about regret, about mistakes, about wanting to understand. She didn't ask for forgiveness, but she admitted she was wrong. She told me about the baby she lost, the truth behind the posts, the silence after the tragedy. She said she was sorry for everything, for the pain, the lies, the betrayal. I read the letter 3 times before I folded it away. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted closure, but another part just wanted to move forward. Sometimes, words aren't enough. Sometimes, the best answer is silence. Life went on. I focused on the future. Megan and I talked about starting a family of our own. We dreamed quietly about a home filled with love and laughter, not obligations and resentment. I started therapy to work through the years of emotional baggage. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I learned that family isn't about blood or history alone. It's about respect, about showing up, about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. It's about choosing love every day, even when it's hard. The hardest lesson was learning to forgive without forgetting, to protect myself without building walls that trap me, to love without losing myself. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights, Megan slipped her hand into mine. "We're going to be okay," she said softly. And in that moment, I believed her. I still think about the family I was born into, the house full of secrets, the fractured bonds, the silent battles, but I don't dwell there anymore. I've built my own family now, chosen, trusted, real, and that makes all the difference. For anyone out there struggling with broken ties, I want to say this. You're allowed to walk away. Sure, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to protect your peace. And sometimes, that means starting over with courage, with hope, and with love.